Welcome to the fourth meeting of the Kentucky Unemployment Insurance Reform Task Force. If you are remote, please let us know and then turn your microphone to mute. So I'm going to ask Sasha to call the roll.
Senator Alvarado.
Present remotely from my district.
Thank you. Senator Storm. Senator Wilson.
Here in the room.
Senator Yates. Representative Branscombe.
Present in the room.
Representative Cantrell. Representative Pratt.
In the room.
Representative Sharp. Co-Chair Nemeth.
Present in the room.
Co-Chair Weber.
Present in the room.
Do we have a quorum? Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from August meeting? We have motion. We have second. We have second. Anyone opposed? Motion carries and the minutes are approved. Today we have Secretary Link, who has been, we most appreciate him coming quite often to testify. We have Buddy Hoskins and Morgan Eves of the Unemployment Insurance Office. Are you all already online?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, thank you. You may proceed.
Great. Good morning. And Mr. Chairman, thank you again for having us this morning. Along with me, as you noted, is Buddy Hoskinson, who is the Executive Director of the Office of Unemployment Insurance, and Morgan Eve, who is our Legislative Director at the Kentucky Labor Cabinet. I appreciate the task force for inviting us to speak today, and also appreciate your support as we work together to improve Kentucky's unemployment insurance system, which is something we all want to see achieved. And if I could just take a second, I'd also like to publicly acknowledge the dedication and the hard work of our unemployment insurance and career center staffs who, despite a lot of public criticism, have worked and continue to work incredibly long hours in order to process unemployment insurance claims for all Kentuckians. So I just wanted to mention that. Morgan, if we could go to the next slide, please. Mr. Hoskinson and I will tag team, and we have about 16 slides to go through, Mr. Chairman, and then we'll certainly be happy to take any questions during our presentation or at the end, whichever you would prefer. But I want to start off by noting that recently we have been conducting what we call deep dives or strategic planning sessions to start really looking at a lot of the core issues surrounding the unemployment insurance system here in Kentucky, the challenges that we've faced, and we want to create comprehensive solutions that the cabinet can implement now that we have an RFP on the street to totally replace the system. But we know that will take several months, and in the interim, we know we have to work on improving the current system and addressing the needs of all the claimants. And we also are working with all the resources we have available to us. And as circumstances come up, we have to reprioritize at times how we utilize those resources to have the greatest impact. So I'll turn to Buddy now to give you a little more information about these strategic planning sessions that we've been holding.
Good morning. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Just wanted to verify. As Secretary Link said, we very much do appreciate having the opportunity to have these discussions and ongoing conversations to improve our system and our services. So I think the strategic planning session and the deep dive that we recently did, we did that with UI leadership, IT leadership, and the Commonwealth of Technology leadership to really kind of look at what are things that we are seeing now that while we may not be able to necessarily take a lot of breathing room, we do have some momentum to take a step back and to really look at the deep dives of what we're trying to plan and how we want to move things forward with some system updates, some product updates, and some work solution updates. So just to kind of give you a high overview, we spent a good day and a half going through everything that we could come up with and just putting that on the big note cards around the room, and then really talking about those and diving those in. So just to kind of give you a few of those that we discuss, and where the channels in which people communicate and how we interact with claimants, with LRC, with constituent services, with the public, and how we're able to make sure that we're handling the needs, such as the appointments. Our system in itself, what improvements can we do right now into our system? What are things that we can maybe now, 20 months into a process, go back through and look at where we can do some improvements? Obviously, what we always talk about is how do we work the backlogs? How do we assist with the adjudication? Are there things like what we've recently implemented, ID.me, that we can implement out? The data warehouse, how we can get that information out and make sure that our systems do talk to each other in a way that we can get the reliable data that we're seeking. Optimizing, obviously, our workflow, our resources. Every time we put a project in place with IT or COT, it is how do we allocate those resources, not just financially, but the manpower for those resources. And then I think, as most of us in that committee, in that strategic planning came away with, is how do we put things into plain language and make sure that anyone and everyone can understand what we're trying to get across, in whether it's in their summary of their accounts or just how, not so much of the UI speak, I'll just say that. And so we're going after some funding out of a recent grant opportunity to help us do that and look at all of our forms. That was something that came out of that. Our imaging solutions, how our interface looks. So in that, some of the action items came out of that, and that is the virtual appointments, the website improvements that we're doing, the fraud prevention detection that we're doing, and putting out a weekly dashboard, a weekly report, a UI report. Our goal with this for the committee to understand is that we will be doing this on a quarterly basis. So it's not a one and done. It's every quarter coming together with that same group of folks and inviting others in as needed to look at what is the landscape at this moment. Where's the landscape changed? Are we hitting our targets? Are we doing the things that we're seeking to do from the previous strategic planning? Morgan? So I'm going to continue on. So we're going to go to the virtual appointments. So our goal in virtual appointments, there's a little bit of difference. And so let me clarify. There are the in-person appointments that individuals can seek every weekday, Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. And then there are virtual appointments in which we schedule, and those come to us in various ways. We have a group of staff who once we schedule virtual appointments, then call and reach out to that claimant. Our goal now is to still do those virtual appointments, but also to make sure that we are working in going back and calling the oldest claims that we still show as unresolved, whatever it may be, if it's one issue or multiple issues, to make sure that that claim is valid, that claim has been verified not to be fraud, and to assist those individuals. So online appointment schedule wrote out on 9/27 with the option to have phone instead of in person. And I know that, I believe it was Representative Sharp last time that asked about this. So if you're in Northern Kentucky, but you're able to get an in-person appointment in Hazard or in Western Kentucky, you're now able to select the option, I want to do it either in person or I want to do it by phone. Next slide, Morgan. Okay, so let's talk about the claimant update, the website. Again, in the strategic planning session, this was about how do we catch the momentum to have continuous improvement, and what do we need to do to help claimants be able to maybe resolve a big portion of what they're putting in and not maybe make either the mistakes or not be able to upload. How can we make it a little bit more user-friendly in order to do that? So this page is just for us to, your claim is, and I'm going to show you a mock-up in just a second, that we're we're at 50% complete on your claim being able to be processed. You're at 75% completion. Automate the communication, and we'll show you a mock-up of that in just a second as well, that we can have communication while you're on your summary page directly. Working to implement that real-time communication tool that I just mentioned in the real chat issue, so that we can hopefully walk a claimant through the majority of the things that they see. And again, reviewing the language on the websites and substitute what I call, again, UI speak or industry speak terminology with plain language. So here's an example of a mock-up that we're looking at on our summary page. And now, so what I want you to understand is all of these things are key pieces to the claim. So if you were to hover over the benefit year end date, it would give you an explanation of what that means. While we know and understand that the claimant has signed off and acknowledged their rights and responsibilities on their claim, and they have access to the rights and responsibilities, and that document is on the website and it's updated every quarter, we want to make sure that we kind of help the individuals on the summary pages. So if you're able to hover over those balances, you'll be able to see what that means in plain language. Now, one of the things we're still working on is up at the top. How can we give you a visual indication as well as what the summary is right there in front of you? How can we make sure that you understand that if you have an action item, if you see at the top where it says program, the claimant action required. So if it says yes, and it says you, the claimant, have a outstanding piece of information we need. It's 1 day owed, it's 2 days owed. Same thing on our side, so that all parties understand where they are in that process. But also at the top, putting some type of, I'll just say bubbles, again, to talk about the completion of where you are in getting your claim processed, and or if it backs up because of a fact-finding need or something else that has happened when you've requested your benefits down the road. Again, our goal overall is to be able to make sure that you can understand your summary page. You can understand if we have identification issues on what needs to be happening. And then we can also provide you that communication tool that I was talking about in real time. And so this is something that while the finished product may not look exactly like this, this was something that we worked on in the strategic planning session to just start going over. Here are all the key pieces that an individual needs, and here are things that we can do to make it a little bit easier for them. So to give you an update on fraud issues and to kind of go through what we've been doing. So we have had a UI fraud task force meet recently. It is a bipartisan effort. Representatives from the OAG office as well as APA. It has local, state, and federal leaders, enforcement investigators a part of it. We have been working on the National Directory of New Hires, Crossmatch, which we do. The National Data Hub, IDH, which we also participate. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, when you all had Joe Horvath speak to the group the last time from Foundation of Government Accountability, he spoke about some of these things that we actually do currently. The annual UI report to legislatures on fraud, indicators of fraud claims, identification verification. You know, recently we did the ID.me launch back in June. When we started at the beginning of the pandemic, we had over 1 million ID verification issues going on in bottlenecking our system. We're down to less than 90,000 ID issues. ID.me allows that person to verify, and if they're unable to do so, to set up a video conferencing to also go to the next level. We've locked out, again, that was talked about from your last guest speaker. We've locked out IP addresses from outside countries. We verify addresses that have multiple claims on there. We are taking the measures that I think on looking at bank accounts, looking at, like we just said, the duplicated IP addresses, and again, multiple claims from multiple addresses. It's not uncommon to have 2 claims and possibly 3 claims from the same address, but again, you wouldn't have 10 or more on there. So And some of the things we've done and launched, I think is good news for us when we're not able to tell our good stories all the time. Here's good news. We launched that fraud form and link back in January and February. We've had 58,000 people go onto that fraud link, and we advise them what to do in case it's identity fraud to take measures to protect themselves. We've worked over 50,000 of those. Now, be mindful and know that it's not always about fraud when they come in. They may be asking another question, but we've been able to work over 50,000 of those. We also have a fraud inbox that we've closed out to do the link. And between the two, we've been able to hit those pretty hard and to verify that they're not being paid out or it is a fraud claim. And these are the following steps you need to take. Most recently, individuals have been receiving what we call our decisions. If you want to talk UI speak, our decisions that something is not payable due to an identity. Part of the strategic planning was that we were able to close a good number of issues and issue those determinations. So we've had calls where individuals have said, I never filed. Well, unfortunately, an imposter did try to file on you and they used your address. They just didn't use all of your information. And therefore, we're just trying to protect you to let you know that nothing was paid out. Morgan, I think if you want to go to slide 7. Launching an online dashboard to provide weekly updates. We want this to be a way to kind of get out the information. And for you all on the task force, we want you to have that information as well. We want to give you information that includes the initial claims, the number of continuous claims, the number of issues that we're seeing, claims waiting action, and the amounts paid. I get a weekly claims report as I get every week, and I know what we have coming through. So for an example, I know that in this past week, we had 3,230 new initial claims filed in 1 week. We had additional or reopened claims of 1,423. We had in extended unemployment compensation 26. We had no extended benefits for last week. And then we had 32 new pandemic assisted claims. We have that information. What we want to do is to be able to share that information with not only you, but also to the public. And so we are preparing those dashboards now and we'll put on our website and we'll have those updated weekly. And eventually the system will be able to update it and run a script to do that programmatically. But for the meanwhile, we'll make sure we put that updated information. Okay, so I think at this point, what I want to talk to you about is some resources. So during the CARES funding, the federal government just this summer launched what we call Tiger Teams. We want self-improvement. We want to continue that momentum. We want to leverage our wins, and we want to recognize areas that we need to step up or make changes. So the federal government launched what they call Tiger Teams, and you see that on the screen here. They're experts from all disciplines throughout the UI system that will come in and assess and provide resources and also give us ways that we can leverage some dollars to help us. So Kentucky was not the first cohort group to go into it, but we were the first one to ask, could we be a part of the second group? So starting on October the 5th, we launched about an 8-week Tiger Team session. Now, again, I will tell you, is it the right time to do it? Are we busy? 100%. Is it the right time? It 100% is. If we don't take a step back and take those painful moments to really look at ourselves and to make those deep dives all across the board, we can't continue to improve. So we took this opportunity and said, yes, we want to do it. And we're going to do it. And we'll give you updates on how that Tiger Team in future meetings. So in-person and phone data. I know again, this is something we want to be able to report on that dashboard. So just so that you see from April 15th, when we started till now, we have assisted over 56,000 people in-person appointments. And again, why it may not be everyone, and we're not going to stop until we get to everyone, that's 56,000 people being able to come in and get assisted and hopefully get answers and or get processes started. And as I said previously, new appointments open up every weekday, Monday through Thursday at 9 a.m. Total scheduled 65,000 to this point. So we've had some no-shows, but just to tell you how many we've completed right there. And I think that's pretty remarkable to stand up 13 career centers during a pandemic and trying to make sure we're social distancing and keeping people safe. April 15th to September 24th, the call center has taken over 94,000 calls and trying to help, whether it's PIN resets or basic information about UI. And again, that's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we currently staff 35 in the call center, and we have open positions and still, like many other companies, seeking more so that we can open up the Saturday and Sunday hours as well.
My turn. Thank you, buddy. On slide 10 here, obviously, the end of the federal extended benefits concluded on September 6th. And with that now, our career development offices will, of course, still be helping people with that are on unemployment insurance services. But we've also renewed our focus back to employment and reemployment services at our career centers, because obviously that's what we all want. We want people to get back to work. So now Kentuckians can go to our career centers and they can seek job search or training assistance at any of the 13 centers across the state, and no appointment is required. Each center has been proactive about seeking area employers who are hiring, and we try to bring those businesses together for job fairs and fairs held during UI in-person appointment hours. So job seekers can easily make these connections while they're at the career center. And as these events are being held, the cabinet and Morgan is sending these event information pieces to the area legislators via email so that they can spread the word to their constituents in their districts. Every area of the cabinet is constantly seeking additional resource support, as Buddy mentioned, as evidenced with the recent grant awards from the U.S. Department of Labor. The grants will help us identify UI claimants who are likely to exhaust their benefits, and we can provide them with the training and ability to seek and secure new employment. And to ensure they remain motivated and supported, CDO staff will follow up with each participant until they obtain employment in the future. Next slide. Obviously, we're dealing with the Delta variant, and that has impacted thousands of employers across the state, and the Labor Cabinet and the Office of Unemployment Insurance and the Career Development Centers are no different in that respect. Despite implementing safety precautions at all of our centers, we've struggled with staffing shortages due to positive staff cases and exposures. So we have protocols that we have to follow when that occurs. This has led to reshuffling appointments, and recently with the Owensboro Center, we had to close for 3 days because we didn't have staff that could come into the office. But we did move those to phone appointments to try to maintain the momentum of keeping these appointments going. And in order to ensure that claimants are served and that our staff are protected, we really want to encourage, which is the message I think all of us want to send, is the vaccination rates have to rise. We have to get the cases down so that we can provide these services in person to people. And we ask that they reach out to their communities to share that message. Buddy?
Thank you, sir. Here's where I'm really going to ask something of you as legislators. In this pandemic of this past year, look at this. Look at the numbers. While it's not everybody, and we acknowledge that. If you look at the Great Recession, the number of claims that went out, 1,300% increase. I know that I have staff members who live in your districts. I know that, and they work hard every day. Please acknowledge the great work. Look at that. The number of claims that were paid out in 2020. I need for them to know, because of the responsibility that they personally take from the criticisms and how much work they've done. They've done 10 years worth of work in that 1 year. If you look at that, it's to me, it's remarkable. And why it's not everything, and why we 100% agree that we have improvements to make. That's why we're here at the table with the conversation. I just want to make sure that we recognize the good things that we have accomplished in this year. So in the UI updates, again, you see 2.4 million claims received, $6.6 billion paid. Now, another good thing that you all did with us and working together, and thank you so much for the efforts with this, was the opportunity to provide waivers in those situations where overpayments came through at no fault of the individual. We've been sending out letters since June, and that process continues as they get work through the fact finding and the adjudication portion. If we realize that they belong a part of that group, they get sent a letter and they get that 30-day window to do the waiver. So that will be ongoing. It wasn't a one and done. But to this date, 5,780 claims have been processed in the overpayments. Over $8 million have been waived. And again, I think that was in great efforts with working with legislatures. And so thank you for that, because that takes a big burden off many individuals. They have 30 days from the notice to do that. They can go in and either to their claim and complete the form, or we also provided to them in a written form with a special envelope to process out. For those who didn't answer it maybe correctly or was unsure, we've gone back to those. I believe there are about 400 of those that we've come back through, and that I have my lower level appeals reaching out to them to make sure they understood how they were completing it. And again, because we want to give those efforts as much as possible.
As the committee is well aware, and during my first appearance before the committee, the Commonwealth had just recently canceled the previous RFP for the unemployment insurance system replacement due to various reasons. We had tremendous amounts of fraud that were coming in, and we felt like the increased security that was required, as we reported back in July. The apparent successful vendor at that time withdrew their bid. So in the best interest of the Commonwealth, we felt it was the right decision to make to take the lessons that were learned over that previous RFP period and to implement a new RFP that was more comprehensive, that included all of the new elements and the new information that we had learned. And that RFP was issued on August the 27th. And to date, we are exactly on track with that process. And we anticipate that the proposals will be due and be received by October 19th. That is the due date for those. And then we'll, of course, go through the evaluation of those responses to select the best vendor to meet the Commonwealth's needs. And that will certainly take several days to go through that. There will be a negotiation period, and then we will enter into a contract to pursue that new system. But in the meantime, as has been mentioned throughout our presentation, we are working hard on these interim steps to improve the systems we do have in place now, because obviously a new system replacement will take several months. We anticipate anywhere from 18 to 24 months. But that doesn't mean we have to stop improving what we do have and meeting the needs of the claimants that have claims in the system right now. So we will continue to work on that, and certainly we'll keep the task force apprised of the progress that we have. And hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, we should have a contract in place in the next few weeks ahead. Buddy.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And to the point of what the Secretary said, I'll just add to all of the good work that we're doing through IT and through the strategic planning, or we call them sprints. They are rated, they are put in priority, and then for 4 weeks, they are dedicated to those resources. So that's how we're able to move things forward. So let's talk about OUI audits. Audits are not always a good thing, but not really a bad thing if we do this the right way. This is about self-improvement. This is about improving our processes and strengthening what we do. So we do have a few audits going on in place, from the CARES Act audit to the APA, and some specialized audits that the federal level has asked to do across the country. Now, on the CARES Act audit, we just completed. Every state will go through a CARES Act audit. We are responding to those questions, and we've been providing thousands of pages of documentation. Doing the same thing exactly with the APA and going through those. So, Morgan, if you want to hit the next slide with that, what I will just say is in the audits with the state auditor, I believe we have completed 7 of those 9, a couple of those take a little longer in progress. And then some of those take other agencies and organizations to be a part of for those improvements. But again, this is about creating the internal controls, the self look inside, making sure we strengthen what we do so that we're building a good foundation. As the secretary likes to say, we really have to build the church for Easter Sunday. And I totally agree with that. And so when we take those reflections back, I know it's hard for staff when they see those things, or hard for us to see those things, but we do try to take those from the approach of how do we self-improve from that. So some of the reform UI updates that we can talk about is, I know that Joe Horvath from the Foundation of Government Accountability, I was glad to see him speaking on that. He complimented legislatures for many of the reforms that you've already taken with unemployment insurance, but also gave some topics for discussion. Suitable work is one of those terms. That's a UI speak work. What is suitable work? No specific in the current regulations regarding that. So again, suitable work to us is what is comparable to what you've already had. And how much time do you have? For best practice in Kentucky, it's a 30-day window for you to get a match 1-to-1. Then after that, we ask for you to find suitable work. Suitable work is also within 100-mile distance, just so you know. I believe you also spoke about indexing a benefit reform. Work search. We do one work search per week, but what is a meaningful work search and proof and verification? I believe that's what Joe was talking about. And we agree with that. We also agree that there has to be some language in that change probably in order to strengthen that, because it's about staff in order to be able to validate. And just to kind of give you a number on that, Morgan, you may want to switch to the next slide with that, but as we finish. In work refusals, I know we've had this topic come up a couple of times, that a company has the right to put in a work refusal. We've spoken about that. In 2021, 507 work refusals have been put in on the form on the employer services side, which is on our website, kcc.ky.gov. In 2021, we have made decisions on 396 of those. Since May 9th, since we had our work search put back in play, we've had 245 decisions made on that. Now, remember, a company puts in a claim that somebody didn't show up or didn't do that. We still have to validate that there was a valid interview, application process. We have to do the fact finding. We can't turn off somebody's benefits just because it was reported. We are obligated to do that fact finding, and we do take that very serious, but that is manpower for us. And that's all I'll have to say, Mr. Secretary. If you want to finish up anything, then I guess we will entertain any questions that the group has.
Yeah, thank you, buddy. And Mr. Chairman, members of the task force, we appreciate your indulgence, and we're happy to address any questions we can at this time.
Thank you. I have a question from Representative Branscombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple questions, if I may. I believe it's slide 5 when it's talking about the UI updates, the claimant website. And it's the slide that's showing where someone who has filed a claim can see their claim status. There you go. One question I had, you were talking about trying to guide folks in the right direction. Will there be a link or somewhere that directs them on where to go next to upload any information they need to upload, or just some direction there on the website for where they need to go next?
Yes, sir. And so we already do have videos that are on our website that does that. And we already have a similar page, not exactly this page by no means, but we do guide people through the step process. What we're trying to do, again, is just make sure that we're doing it in plain language, and for those that are also the visual learner as well.
Okay, thank you. One follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Representative, if I may interrupt really quickly,
Sure.
That communications tool at the bottom that you see, if they have questions about how or where they need to upload information, they can communicate live with the representative right in there who can provide them those instructions.
Okay, thanks, Morgan. One follow-up question I had, and it was in a news article yesterday. It was regarding the claims filed, and it was the potential fraud claims that we're seeing the increase in those. The article referenced that in June of 2020, so this would have been last year, 161,000 in claims were filed. 5,477 were marked as potential fraud. Now we fast forward a year from that here in 2021. The claims filed dropped. I think the number is roughly around 55,000, but there were 20,000 that was marked as potential fraud. Can you speak to that? And is this a trend that we're going to continue to see? Or I know there's some measures that you talked about that are being put in place to cut back on the fraud, but that's a pretty large portion of that 55,000 that is marked as fraud.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that question. I will tell you nationwide, that's the big topic for all unemployment offices. Kentucky's no different and will be no different. We work with our National Workforce Association and our fellow states on just tackling this issue. We too, when we saw the uptick, if you remember, when we reset the PIN issue back in April, could see where things were coming in or how that goes to. Imposters are going to continue to try to come at the door and come through the door. Right now, the ID.me is once you get into the portal. ID.me is now going to be, we are working in process to put the ID.me in front of the portal. So you will have to go through ID.me each and every time in order to get into your claim. We already know that that is stopping. We already know that people are getting the determinations, even though you may not have filed and somebody did file on your behalf, you're receiving notice that nothing was paid out. We are seeing those successes with that. But yes, the tools and resources that we're doing today are tools and resources for today. Our goal is to continually look at that landscape, continually to do that risk assessment to see what other things we need to put in place or how we need to continue to tighten up measures to combat fraud.
I appreciate that and urge, echo what you just said, urge to continue that if this is what we're going to be seeing from here on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you indulge me, I have several questions for them.
We'll continue as far as we can with time.
I understand. On page 7, Mr. Hoskins, you said UI data dashboard updates on this. I do appreciate that. My question is, if you've been getting this information, why weren't we, and can we have it immediately?
Yes, sir. We have been providing information to those in legislatures as well as others who have asked for that in the media. So what we're just trying to do is make it more user-friendly and make sure that you have a definition of what does everything mean, how is it calculated. What we're trying to do is just improve in that category, sir.
Okay, thanks, sir.
And may I piggyback onto that?
Yes, ma'am.
Previously when we had a sort of the high point in claims, each time we pull this information, we're pulling someone off working claims. So at that point, it was prioritizing getting benefits and people's pockets. And now that we're seeing a bit of relief and filing of claims, we can readjust staff resources just a little bit.
I appreciate that. Like I said, but again, computers spit out reports fairly quickly, but thank you guys. Actually, and my next one is the Tiger teams. You mentioned them. We said we weren't in the first, we're in the second. Do we have a Tiger team actually coming to Kentucky?
So it will be basically virtual, but because of the Delta variant. So on October 5th, that group of individuals from all over the country will be dedicated to Kentucky for an 8-week window of time and for us to look at all areas. So it's another basically, it's a self-assessment that we will be going through. We've been doing this to various degrees with our regional federal partners in various groups and asking questions. We do technical assistance, but this is just a more comprehensive, cohesive group that looks at everything from how are we set up in our divisions, how are we set up for our workflow, also system improvements that they may be able to see that we're not being able to see. All of that is on the table, sir.
Thanks, sir. The employment services, you guys talked about that. Again, I appreciate the fact you do give the employer a chance to say when job was refused, but I can tell you as a small business owner, this is not what we do. I would really like to see you guys, and I know you've heard me say this before, contact the employer when someone says, I applied at my company or whatever company, and use them for a reference, that you guys would follow up with a phone call, an email, or something automatically generated so that we would be alerted, because a lot of times we have no idea if someone said, I've applied at this company or that company or my company. That would give us a level of protection, and you guys, for stop these fraudulent claims from people that should be actually looking for work but aren't. So again, that's just a statement. Now, my real concern in this is I want to talk about this. You put out an RFP for your system, and guys, I'm extremely concerned that we have really got a system here that's going to cost the taxpayers and employers a lot of money here in Kentucky. Basically, appears to me, looking to RFP, you're building this system from the ground up. I can tell you at my company, I could hire an accountant, a CPA, and a data person to build a system that would be great for my company. We could afford it, but I don't waste money. Why are you not getting a system off the shelf? We use QuickBooks and Real Green. Is it perfect? No. Do we make it work? Yes, at a lot less cost. I'm extremely concerned at the cost of this, and it appears, I've looked at the RFP, you're building this from the ground up. This seems to be a waste of taxpayers' dollars on this. Guys, I'm extremely concerned about that. Anyone want to comment?
Representative Pratt, this is Jamie. I fully appreciate what you're saying and agree completely. One of the first questions I asked when I arrived here as Labor Secretary is there a CAN program that we can go out and get? Are there other states that are facing this same issue? And of course, most all states are facing the same issue, and they're rebuilding their systems as well, because the systems that address the current fraud tactics, that address the federal requirements, that address specific state requirements, and address all of the things. There were states that had just completed unemployment insurance system upgrades before the pandemic, and they're having to go back and rebuild their systems because they weren't built to handle the circumstances that we faced starting in March of 2020. So I appreciate that. And we're obviously going to try to get the most economical product that we can. I think we've all seen that sometimes these IT systems can drag out for months, if not years, and cost more money than was budgeted. And we're committed to making sure that does not happen. That's why we went through the second round for an RFP, because we wanted to get it right. And if there are best practices or other systems that are being developed for other states, we want to piggyback on that as best we can. But we're trying to address something that hadn't been seen for over 100 years with this pandemic and the impacts that it had on unemployment insurance claims. So I appreciate your comments. I totally agree with them. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we get the most economical, best product we can, so that we don't have to address this again in future years.
Representative Pratt, I'd like to weigh in on that, if I may.
Sure. Yes, sir.
With working at the Labor Cabinet, there are many very qualified IT people, and the COT is too. And we went through this with the workers' compensation when we first came there. They were dragging their feet, which Representative Pratt has a very good point. When you don't buy off the shelf and you have a company coming in, they drag their feet to maybe continue on and on and on. But Secretary Link, if you will watch that, if you get a one that you're helping to build or someone's coming in helping to build, and make sure that you have the code, your IT people have the code so that they can change and continue on the way it is necessary, then I think the way you're going is probably right, because most of the off-the-shelf doesn't address everything you need. It's more, it's not comprehensive. It's somewhat cookie cutter for all the states. So if the cost is not ungodly, I think you are going in the right path, as long as you watch that they don't take advantage of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we will make sure that all the milestone dates are hit and that the costs are justified. And again, we'll be back with the UI Reform Task Force to report on that progress.
Thanks, sir. Again, I guess part of that too is the fact that if you bought one off the shelf, you could be up going in months. Now we're 2 years out from actually getting the system up and going. You also mentioned UI audits is currently undergoing 4 audits. Will we know the results of those audits?
Yes, sir. Those will be public record. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. All right, and 2 last questions. I appreciate y'all's patience. The governor rolled out a $1,500 payment to get people back to work. How many people actually applied for that?
As of today, sir, we've had 1,041 applications.
Thanks, sir. All right, my last question today, vaccines. There are employers that are requiring people to get a vaccine to remain employed there. This is a yes or no answer. If you refuse to get a vaccine and an employer terminates you, do you get unemployment?
Buddy,
It
can you take this?
it is not a yes or no answer. That's
Yeah,
the-
I'll answer. I will answer that, Representative. Unfortunately, it's sort of a legal answer, and that it depends. Each UI claim, as you know, is very individualized. We can't give a blanket response. It depends on the individual employer's policy, how they made the policy known. And it does create an issue in the claim, which will then have to be investigated.
That was not a yes or no answer. Thank you.
Thank you for going through them very quickly. So, Representative Cantrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a comment and then a quick question. Unemployment is a great social safety net program. It should be there when people need it. It should be funded. It should be strong. It should be accessible. But I think we'd be a little remiss in this task force today if we didn't acknowledge the huge announcement, groundbreaking, record-breaking announcement that's going to be made today, that media reports have been made about a $5.8 billion investment in the state and 5,000 new jobs coming to this state. Big announcements like that are probably, a couple in a lifetime, but economic development in this state is a piece of this puzzle when we're talking about how to work on our unemployment system. And since that's just come, in the past, 12 or 14 hours, I think we should acknowledge that in this task force. My question, and thank you, Mr. Secretary and Buddy and Morgan, for your presentation today. My question comes from slide 9. And looking at these numbers on the staff calls from the call center, 94,000 calls, and we hear a lot of constituent complaints about people who wait for a long time and do not have their phone call answered, and you have 35 call center staff on that, and you have some open positions right now. Is that enough staffing to handle those calls? Are there still a lot of calls not being answered? And have you looked at either throughout the pandemic some of the things that you all have done in terms of staffing your phone lines, or looked at what other states have done in terms of hiring a vendor to handle some of those calls sort of at an as needed basis?
Yes, Representative. This is Buddy. I'll respond to that. So we do need more staff, and we recognize that. The goal was to have 3 different day, evening, and weekend shift. Again, like most other employers, we're trying to get good qualified individuals that we can train up and having that same difficulty. We've been working with AWS, who is our provider for the phone services. I keep up on one of my screens what we have on the call log, what's going on, where we have influxes. And again, making sure that people are calling the direct number, the 2900 number, because that is the proper number for the call center. But we do recognize, and AWS is working with us. We did a deep dive with them as well to see if there were some other things that maybe we could do through technology, through some type of chat bot that could answer some of the easy questions or step people through so we could elevate those calls a little bit. So it is a work in progress, and it will continue to be a work in progress. But again, like most other companies, we're trying to get good qualified individuals.
Absolutely. I completely understand that. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Senator
Thank you.
Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I did have three questions, but Representative Pratt took the one I was concerned about with people losing their jobs over not taking the vaccine. So I appreciate that. But I want to ask Buddy, how soon will this claimant website be updated, what you have shown us today?
So, sir, to be honest with you, we're in the prototype of trying to go through how and what resources we have for that. I believe I mentioned the sprints. We have to do sprints in order to get that work done. One of the things that we've focused on a great deal since coming over to the Labor Cabinet is putting the allocated resources. So what we're doing now is defining the business terms of what this takes, what are the resources to do that. Our goal would be hopeful to have this done by the end of the year so we could launch it out. As we get steps and pieces that we can improve, we will push those out there. But our goal is to continuously have that improvement. One of the first and primary things that we have to do is get that ID me in front of the website. That is our first go that has to happen. That will help us tremendously with the fraud efforts.
And
Okay.
Senator, as we move along with this updated claimant website, we'll be happy to share that information with the task force members.
I appreciate that. One last quick question. Based on the auditor's discovery of 400,000 emails that were unanswered, have those all been cleared out and answered?
So we'll go touch on that. Yes, sir. 400,000 is what he claims. There were 127,000 unique. As of the early part of the summer, we were down to 67,000 of the 67,000 of those 127,000 had been receiving their payments, and I believe we're down to 24,000 of those trying to finish working out. Now, mind you, again, that goes back to one of our strategic plan efforts. What is the vehicle in which they're coming through? And all of our email boxes have been reevaluated and to make sure that that's the proper tool and the proper way that we want to get a claimant to come to us. So all of that is in the progress. And that's the reason why the very first strategic plan was, how do we, in what doors do we have folks come through so we can make sure we're serviced?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions. Secretary Link, I know that you have an estimated cost of $47 million during the project, I think is what was quoted. I've talked to some vendors who think it's going to be much higher than that. $65 to $70 million is what I'm hearing based on all the requests and what we want in the program. Who came to that conclusion of the cost? Is that a wishful amount, or is it an actual amount that's been analyzed by people within your department, or is it from other entities?
Senator, thank you for the question. I believe that estimate was arrived at in conjunction with the Commonwealth Office of Technology and the best estimate we had at the time that the RFP was developed. Certainly with any project of this magnitude, we will look at the proposals and see what vendors are proposing, and then we'll have to go through certainly a competitive negotiation. We'll have to go through value engineering and see where we can find greater efficiencies. But at this time, our estimate is, like you said, $47.5 million. And we won't know until we get the proposals back from the potential vendors to understand exactly what their numbers are going to be.
How long do you think this project is going to take? I mean, again, hearing from some folks, they're estimating a 3 to 5 year window of time to get all the things we're requesting in this program up with a much significantly higher cost than what's being estimated. So do you have any idea of how long? I know we've had that question before.
Our goal is that it take no longer than 24 months to implement.
Okay. Well, people that I know they're in the industry or say they've looked at that and said it's going to take a lot more money and a lot more time based on what we're requesting is the only thing I put that out for members of the committee just to be aware. Director Hoskins, also, I know you're saying that you want to give the folks who are working a lot of credit. We do give them a lot of credit. The criticism hasn't been levied at the employees who are doing the work. It's been at the leadership. And there's lots of reasons for that, I think. And we've had those discussions. You've heard plenty of committee hearings, people that get to cut in line that's being promulgated by leaders that are overseeing how things have been rolled out with unemployment insurance. So the criticism has never been at the staff and the workers. We've had plenty of people that have volunteered to provide workers. Leadership is stunk with the unemployment insurance rollout. I think all of us are aware. I think you've heard those criticisms. So the criticism are there, not at the staff that are working really hard. And again, it's ongoing. You'll be getting an email from me, another in person since March, trying to get through. It's tough because when it's a phone line that's set up or an answering machine and they're told, yeah, just leave your voicemail there. We'll get to it when we get to it. There's no one that's handling that. I mean, there's no one to criticize. It's just that's the answer is a phone line, leave your message, impersonal. We get all those emails. We get all those communications as well. People saying, please, somebody talk to me, know that I'm alive, that someone's paying attention. That's been the frustrating part of it, is when people are basically marginalized. And that's how a lot of people have felt about the whole process. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Sharp.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hopkins and Mr. Link and Ms. Eves, I want to thank you guys for addressing my concerns and the concerns in 100 District, and I really appreciate that. And I do recognize the efforts, at least at our local office there in Ashland. I go in there probably 1 or 2 times a month and see how things are running. My concern right now is that office is staffed below 30%, and I have brought this up outside of committee. I want to bring it up now and find out what's the plan forward to get the staffing fixed in Ashland.
Representative Sharp, this is Jamie. We are, as Buddy mentioned earlier, we are facing the same challenges that many, if not most, employers across the Commonwealth are facing. We are currently evaluating our pay scales and looking at ways. We're constantly advertising open positions, and we're not getting any responses to that, or very few responses to that. I think it's a dilemma that everyone's facing. And then on top of that, because of the frontline nature of these positions in the career centers, we've had numerous instances of positive testing or positive exposures of our staff. And because of protocols, they then have to not be in person, and that further reducing our staff availability. So that's why we're exploring not only ways to improve how we can hire more people, but also looking at virtual and other technology solutions that we can address the claimant's needs in the best way possible.
And I can appreciate that. Do you know when you might come to a resolution on this issue? I mean, how far along down the road are you on it?
It's an ongoing process, sir. We are advertising every day for positions in our career centers. And, because of the personnel guidelines, those are graded positions that fall within certain salary ranges. And they have obviously certain duties that have to be performed. And we're just not getting a robust response to that. So we're currently looking at pay scales to see if we can make those positions more attractive within our allotted budget. And then we're looking again at any technological solutions that we can find, either through telephone, through virtual appointments like our meeting today, to find ways that we can still service customers as quickly as possible.
And Representative Sharp, if I can add to this, we also have to be in compliance with our guidelines of our federal staffing requirements. So not anyone can just perform the UI functions of that. They are required to be considered merit or the FFTL staffing. They cannot make any analytical decision-making. So no contract folks can do that. There was a flexibility of the law all the way up until Labor Day, and we've had to, anybody that was assisting us from any temp agencies or anything of that nature, we've had to move them off of doing any of that work because that flexibility has left and has not been provided back to us on the federal level.
And I can appreciate that, Mr. Hopkinson. Is there something that we can recommend from this task force to help you guys out with fixing this problem?
Representative Sharp, I think that's a conversation that I would welcome to have, and would love to do that. And I'll work with Morgan to get with you and any other members of the task force that would like to have, that we would appreciate that input and see what we could do from a legislative perspective that might be helpful in helping us resolve this issue, because you're exactly right. We need bodies. We need qualified bodies that both meet the state personnel guidelines as well as what Buddy mentioned with the federal requirements. So if it's all right, I'll get with Morgan and we will get back with you to have that conversation and see what options we can come up with.
Representative, we're currently looking at our budget. Every cabinet in the executive branch is currently looking at what our next budget request will be. And it may be a general fund request for staffing. We're not sure at this time, but as soon as we figure that out, we're happy to meet with you or, the committee as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Co-Chair Weber.
Thank you, Senator Nemes. Thank you all for being here today and giving us an update. I do have several questions here. I'll begin with waiver overpayments. How many of those have you received to date, and how many of those overpayment waivers have been denied?
So we've received to date 5,700 of those have been processed. We've only have about 400 of those that were denied and went to the lower level appeals to be reviewed. I think it's a little bit over 8 million. Yes, right there, 5,700 processed. Now, mind you, that's a 30-day window, sir, if you remember correctly from the time they get that letter. So the biggest set of that group went out in the third week of June. So we would have received a majority of those already back. 8 million have been waived at this point. About 400 are in the appeals process, seeking clarification or allowing them to go through the appeals because they may not have answered or did not sign it correctly. We are definitely trying to assist. And as I mentioned in the presentation, we will continue as they get through adjudication. If we find others who belong in this group, they will receive their notice and get the same 30-day window of time.
All right, thank you for that. I want to circle around and to go back to our career centers for just a moment. Are the career centers still under the Education and Workforce Development Cabinet?
No, sir. The Representative Weber, they're under the Labor Cabinet now.
Okay, that was my question.
But
I wanted to make sure to see if that's something we need to address. If it would be better to have them under one cabinet, but it appears that's currently what you have.
Well, and Representative Weber, pardon the interruption, but we still have to work closely with the Education Workforce Development Cabinet and the Department for Workforce Investment because of the federal grants and funding that come along with that, as well as the reporting that we have to make back to the U.S. Department of Labor. So there still is a joined at the hip relationship, if you will, in some regards.
Okay, I appreciate that. Secretary Link, I want to go back for a minute to the selection of the modernization vendor. So that process ends on October 19th for those that are interested to submit their bids. And then you mentioned that you would then review those bids and go through the selection and the contract finalization portion
yes,
of
sir.
that. So, and when you gave your answer earlier, I realize you will have a difficult time predicting the future, but I'm still going to ask you to predict the future. Can you kind of narrow that down in terms of what length of time we're looking at? Is it? Do you think 2 weeks is a reasonable time frame? 3 weeks? And my question for that is, I'm anxious to get this process started as soon as possible because we're looking at 18 to 24 months, and we had to change course in the summer in the direction we were headed. I'm pretty anxious that we get this process moving and get this modernization up and running.
As are we, sir, and I'll try to give you my best prediction, and then I'm going to go buy a Mega Millions ticket and try to predict those numbers as well. But obviously, we're working with the Finance Administration Cabinet and the Office of Procurement Services on this procurement. At the process for the RFP, we put out the RFP with requirements, and then potential vendors come back to us with questions regarding the RFP, and then they're due on a certain date, and then we have a certain amount of time to respond to those questions to clarify any issues that vendors might have. And because of the complexity of this procurement, we had 2 rounds of questions that were allowed from the vendors. So the second round of questions are due today, in fact. And then we'll respond back to those, I believe, by October 6th. And then the vendors should have all the information they need to formulate their final proposal and have that to us by October 19th. Depending upon the complexity of that, I don't believe 2 weeks will be sufficient on a project of this magnitude. My hope would be 30 to 45 days of evaluation, assuming we don't run into any major glitches. And as previously asked, we will look at ways that we can obviously address any budget issues. If we can find any efficiencies in conjunction with a successful vendor as we go through the competitive negotiation phase. So my hope would be that with proposals due on October 19th, that certainly within 45 days, we should be at the point of awarding a contract. But again, I want to hedge my prediction on that because the Office of Procurement Services will be the final authority on that. But the Labor Cabinet will do everything we can to push this as quickly and as appropriately as possible.
Thank you. And that 30 to 45 days, and I understand that process, but it is good to have kind of a number that I can work with and keep in mind. Then
we'll stay in touch with you to let you know how we're coming along. We may not be able to get into a lot of detail from a legal perspective, but we can at least kind of give you a temperature reading on how the process is moving.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then one final comment and question for you. As we move forward, and the purpose and the role of this task force is to look at reforms to the system, and we discussed today earlier. Representative Cantrell brought up the economic development that's happening in Glendale, Kentucky, and that is indeed great news, not only for the state but for our area in the state. So there's a lot of moving parts that we're going to be seeing unfold with jobs coming in. We have jobs that we're trying to fill now. Hopefully that's going to lead. We're already seeing it, low unemployment numbers in the state. So one of the things that I'm going to ask you, Secretary Link and Director Hoskinson, and others in your cabinet, is if you will be able to come back to us or submit to us reforms that we can perform or take a look at on the legislative side. I know earlier it was mentioned looking at the budget requests and the number of employees, and I understand that process, but I'm talking about reforms within the cabinet that you look at on a day-to-day basis and say, I really wish we could change that, and it's something that would fall under the jurisdiction of the General Assembly. And we have at least 1 or 2 more meetings left where we could discuss that. And I'd like to ask you to come back with some of those recommendations for this task force. And be just because you're making a recommendation doesn't necessarily mean that it will happen or it won't happen. But I would ask you to just take a thorough look and not leave anything off the table as far as we move forward. And that is a request that I have of you today, Secretary Link.
Chairman Weber, I appreciate that, and I'm in lockstep with you. Our focus, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, has to be renewed on employment services and getting people back to work. And with the announcement yesterday, our leadership team was communicating through the night about what can the Labor Cabinet and our divisions within the Labor Cabinet, what can we do to address the employment needs, not only for the Glendale project, but for employment in general across the state. And we look at that from not only, marrying the employer needs with the employee market to match employees to the employer needs, but also looking at education and training and working with our local workforce investment boards, with our educational institutions, with local governments. What all can we do from a comprehensive standpoint to address the need of employers and the need for employment by our citizens? So I look forward to having that conversation, and we'll put our heads together and come back to you with some thoughts and recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Weber. I have, as Representative Pratt, a plethora of questions and comments, and I hope to be as efficient as he was with his. So, with the backlog that we kept hearing at 60,000 that you obtained when you became secretary, where are we now on that?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to Buddy. He has a better handle on that number than I do personally.
So backlog, sir, continues to be work, as you know. And so an individual, as we've talked about before, could have one or numerous issues. So we have it broken down for what is UI backlog, what is extended benefit, PEC, PUA backlogs. All of those in DRESS are talking about probably individuals of claimants at some point or another, around 80,000 individuals that have either a reoccurring issue where they reopen a claim and it causes the same issue again, or they have one issue on one program but not on another. So again, we're continually working on those as we're staffing up. But again, with the flexibility staffing issue that I mentioned earlier, that does bottleneck us a little bit. But we worked in that strategic plan, sir, to figure out ways that we can maybe put more into buckets and figure out if there are better solutions to address those. And we'll keep you all up to date on those each and every time we meet.
Thank you. The Ernst & Young contract, there was talk about hiring someone else. I assume that has not been done. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. With the new flexibility staffing going away, or with that leaving on September 6th, you can have somebody do the work. You just can't have them push it through. So what you're doing is making us go back and look at their work and then pushing it over the threshold. So it doesn't really assist us in the proper manner.
Thank you. On the adjudication, if I'm correct, there's a board of 3 that looks at that. In times of high volume, I'd like for this to maybe be a request or a recommendation of the task force that we extend that or put temporarily in 3 more people to adjudicate. You have any comments on that?
So I think you might be speaking of the UI Commission. That is
correct.
That's the higher level authority. So once they go through once they get their claim filed and go through fact finding, if they don't receive a decision that they like, then they go to the lower level, and then they can go to the commission. I serve as chair of that commission, and you're correct. There are 2 other members, a labor and a citizen member, that are part of that commission. We review cases. That's my weekend job, I should say. I review cases every weekend. We report back on those cases on Monday. Then we meet once a month, sir, if you recall, to go over any cases that maybe we didn't agree on.
Yes, I am familiar with that. My question was, and point is, we would like to give you help with that at times of high volume.
Yes, sir. And we can let you know we're still not at that high volume level of that. I recall in the recession seeing about 150 cases a week. We're seeing about 30 to 50 cases on average a week at this moment.
Okay, thank you. And when you hire employees, I know that it's tough to get employees that are qualified. Plus, what you're looking at hiring is permanent people. So I caution you to make sure that those are able to transfer to your employment and training counselors, per se, as the secretary has mentioned, where we need to go to from here.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we are looking at cross training to make sure that Career Center staff can perform all of those functions, and obviously that takes a qualified individual and then some extensive training to get them to that point. But we view that the same way.
Another comment is I want to emphasize, Representative Pratt, that the businesses shouldn't have to be proactive on saying that this or that hasn't been done when somebody comes to them and says that they have asked for employment. And for staff, I want that to be a part of the recommendations. And then I'm talking with you, Mr. Secretary. I'll make sure that you can implement that. Another thing is, Senator Alvarado, I know that Chairman Weber and I have continuously said that this task force is more about the future on how we're going to take care of what we do in the future with the new computer system and how we are going to implement unemployment for the future of Kentucky. We're using this terrible time to learn from. So as Senator Alvarado mentioned, there is a interconnection between not just what was done wrong and what needs to be done and the problems that we've had, but also with the leadership's past and future actions, as he repeatedly points out, needs to be addressed and pointed out in the, not blaming anybody, but the facts are in the recommendations of the task force in the future. You want to make any comments, Secretary?
Well, certainly, Mr. Chairman, we, as Buddy's mentioned in his previous comments, we want to learn from the mistakes that were made, and we want to eliminate those. And through the Tiger Team process and working with our federal partners at the Department of Labor, we want to know the best practices across the country, and we want to implement those here in Kentucky. We want to avoid the mistakes that not only Kentucky has made in the past, but other states have made in the past. So this is an ongoing relationship with the General Assembly, with our federal partners, with the local workforce investment boards to make sure that we're doing everything we can to have the most robust and the best unemployment and career development system that we can possibly have. And we look forward to working with the task force and getting your recommendations and thoughts, as well as presenting ours to you for further conversation.
All right, thank you. And on, I think it's slide 3, the online appointment schedule rolled out 9/27. I thought we were already doing that. We talked about that earlier, and that was said to Representative Sharp that they do have a chance if they can't make it to, say, Paducah from Eastern Kentucky, that they could do online. And then here you say you just started it at 9/27.
So we had the opportunity to, if someone notified us to make that change, sir, we would have to go in there and manually do that through that product. And that product has, as we mentioned today, has been able to update that and make that an option automatically and not something that they have to request out through other means.
And the online or phone option, how about it? You have an option of first available.
On the in-person one that they switch over, or?
Well, when they need or want to talk with someone instead of their problems with the computer, how about instead of saying that, do you want an online or in person, that they have an option of first available?
We can definitely put that down and go back to our vendor to see if that can be put in. Yes, sir. Thank you. We can definitely make that a suggestion.
Okay. And then the part where you can have chat, where you can talk to someone online and not have to actually try to get a hold of them on the phone, which has been a problem, I think is a great thing. 2 things about that you don't even need to comment is that it'll be polite language instead of what we hear, whether it was happening or not, hang-ups and saying, I don't need to respond to that. It'll be on record for both, for the labor cabinet and for the person to say how people actually interact with that option. I think that's a good one. And I have a couple other things. On slide 12.
And my understanding is, sir, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just got, someone told me that they can do first available appointment. So I stand corrected on that. So my person who works with the vendor says that can happen. So we'll make sure that is noticeable.
That's great. On, I think, slide 12, you have the 2020 Great upswing, which no one could have handled, even if we were ready for it at first. We do have reservations on how long it has taken to get that down. But do you have the 2021 statistics?
We can get you the first couple quarters and add that to you. We can have Morgan send that to you all.
Thank you. And then on indexing benefits, which I've been a proponent of well before when I was in the cabinet, but before we had a problem. Is there federal obstacles to that on their guidelines?
Other states have done it. So again, what we would do is work with our liaison in our Region 3 to make sure that we're following all protocols and we have all of our steps in place in order to do, if that is something that this group wishes to go forward with, then yes, we would just work to make sure that we follow that proper procedure in all areas.
Another thing I think the task force ought to recommend is that we help applicants with training and jobs. And I think that if they're searched and they refuse, then I think their unemployment benefits ought to be canceled, because the idea is to help them get a job, hopefully a better one, or go through the training to do that. You have any comments on that?
Mr. Chairman, couldn't agree more. I think that it's just part of our mission to get skilled employees married with employers to fill their needs, and then working with all of our partners, both within government, both local, state, and federal government, with our educational and training institutions to set potential employees on the best course for their careers.
Thank you. Another thing that I've always been a proponent of is after a period of time that you're looking for work, I think you should have to accept lesser work instead of just the work that pays as much or is better. Now, a lot of people do that. My brother did that. A lot of people will go on and take whatever they can get, and they understand that will lengthen your unemployment because they don't just cut you off, they give you less. But there's most of the people say, well, why should I work if I'm getting $500 unemployment for $250 and they get $250 from unemployment? I think that maybe we should require them to take a job and help them with the other employers, like restaurants that might want to pay less, but there is a job there. So do you have any comments on that?
So back to the suitable work comment to that, sir. So yes, you as a task force, you could do that reform and to create a more defined language in Kentucky. We consider that as business practice 30 days, but you would have the availability to make those changes so that we could follow that. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Representative Pratt. I hope I was as quick and efficient as you are, at least close to it. But I once again want to let everyone know that we are looking at making Kentucky better, and I want to thank Morgan Eves, who has worked with us to do that, Buddy Hoskinson, that has come here repeatedly and worked hard on it, and Secretary Link, especially you, who has dropped into this problem and has worked with us to make it better. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And we appreciate the opportunity to be with you today and look forward to our future meetings. And it's an honor to serve. And this is a very important time for our state and certainly for the Labor Cabinet. And we want to do all we can in conjunction with the task force and with the General Assembly to resolve these issues and not face this incredible challenge again in the future.
That is correct. And also what we want to do with what's coming up, as Representative Cantrell pointed out, we want this to be a place that the companies want to come and people want to come to work. So transforming the unemployment or interconnecting it with training and education for our people is where we want to go. So
yes, sir.
I see no other questions. The task force will meet in October, date and time to be announced. Do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved by many, so we are adjourned.
Thank you.